In the early noughties, after years of being relegated to low-quality sequels and grindhouse schlock, zombies were finally making a comeback. 2002 saw the release of Danny Boyle's gritty hit 28 Days Later, and also Paul W.S. Anderson's blockbuster Resident Evil. Two takes on a zombie apocalypse that, to be honest, couldn't be more different. And in 2004, a little-known commercials director and the guy who wrote the Scooby-Doo movies got together to make Dawn of the Dead. Yes, that's right. Zack Snyder's first movie, written by James Gunn, was a remake of George Romero's genre-defining original Dawn of the Dead. Despite fan outrage at the prospect of a classic being remade, the film propelled Snyder into mainstream filmmaking, leading right up to the Snyder Cut coming out this year, and of course his newest film, Army of the Dead. But back in 2004, all of that was a distant dream, and Snyder had just made a movie that would redefine the zombie genre once and for all. Let's kick off with a bit of backstory. Zombies have been around for ages, populating even the earliest horror movies, like 1932 Bela Lugosi horror White Zombie.
Master of the undead damned, the sinister power behind the White Zombie.
In these films, zombies are supernaturally coerced servants, commanded by a magically powered master. George Romero is the guy who invented the modern zombie, with his film Night of the Living Dead being the first to portray zombies as flesh-eating cannibals instead of supernatural servants. To call Night of the Living Dead influential is a massive understatement. Apart from its influence on the zombie genre specifically, its vivid gore and grim tone marked a pretty sharp shift in horror movies more broadly, away from spooky and towards disturbing. After a string of arty, less successful features, Romero returned to zombies with producer Dario Argento in tow and made Dawn of the Dead, a sequel that advances the zombie apocalypse portrayed in Night, widening its scope and taking aim at the excesses of capitalism. It follows a small band of survivors who take shelter in a mall and try to ride out the disaster outside, waiting for help and succumbing to boredom while feeling increasingly isolated and disconnected from the world. With some chilling visuals, excellent low-key performances, and a high-octane finale, it's a fantastic horror film and a classic of its genre. So in other words, Snyder had some pretty big boots to fill. Snyder's remake has the bare bones of that story, but in execution is pretty different. Anna is a nurse who finishes a busy shift to go home to her partner. Their date night activities mean that they miss out on some pretty important breaking news. The end of the world is happening. You know, little stuff like that. The next morning, they're awoken by possibly the worst next-door neighbour in film history, and Anna barely escapes with her life, only to find that her corner of Wisconsin has changed forever, much like the rest of the world. She meets up with a group of survivors and heads to the nearest mall, where they hole up, grow their numbers, and try to wait out the apocalypse. As you can see, there are lots of differences between the original film and its remake, enough so that beyond the central premise, people locked up in a mall besieged by zombies, it's basically a completely different film. There's a much bigger cast of survivors, each of whom gets their own little story arc, from jumped up mall cop and wannabe leader CJ, who's quickly put in his place, to pregnant Luda and her protective boyfriend Andre, to stalwart cop Kenneth and his bromance with isolated gun shop owner Andy. But the most notable difference from the previous film is the speed of the zombies. These zombies are not the shambling threat of Romero's movies. Instead, they're lightning fast, incredibly resilient, and often quite intelligent. Humans even turn into zombies faster, with life-threatening injuries leading to pretty much instant zombification. Interestingly, in James Gunn's original script, the bite is more like vampirism, with some sort of supernatural cause behind the zombies that ties into the religious language used by characters throughout the film.
When there is no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth.
Of course, Snyder isn't the first filmmaker to use fast zombies. The rage virus victims of 28 Days Later are essentially fast zombies in anything other than name, and even in Romero's movies, zombies aren't above a light jog if needed. But Snyder's film uses these fast zombies pretty much non-stop, and they're key to the biggest shifts between Romero's original and Snyder's remake. See, I think of Romero's Dawn as being a horror movie through and through. It begins with the downfall of society and follows a limited cast succumbing to boredom as they're stuck inside a monument to American capitalism. It's incredibly bleak, particularly in the director's cut. It's a chilling story about the limits of humanity.
Really all over, is it?
Snyder's Dawn, on the other hand, is essentially an action movie. Although tense and horrific sequences certainly occur, the focus is on survival rather than fear. The characters are well armed and usually joined by other fighters, and the speed of the zombies means that fast-paced action sequences dominate the film. This difference is pretty stark, especially comparing the opening of the two films. In the original, the female protagonist exits the TV studio where she works and looks down on the destruction from a helicopter, lost in her own world. In the 2004 film, Anna's exit from her suburban home is a frantic drive through her city in meltdown.
If you live in Racine County, there is no information at this time. Please stay inside and lock all doors and windows. Miller Park is no longer considered a safe haven.
Snyder and Gunn's fast zombies are a genius idea, and one which reflects their understanding of what I think is the fundamental flaw in zombie movies. Zombies aren't so much horrifying as they are depressing. Okay, don't get me wrong, they certainly can be horrifying and they're definitely gross. But if your zombies are just shambling around mindlessly on a one-to-one basis, they seem pretty easy to avoid. Indeed, in perhaps the most lucrative zombie property, The Walking Dead, zombies themselves have largely fallen by the wayside, replaced by human threats. And in 2004, this shortcoming was already readily apparent, parodied extensively in Shaun of the Dead, which was released just 1 month after Dawn.
Excuse me? Excuse me? Hello?
I think slow zombies were well suited to Romero, who uses his films to make comments about materialism and alienation, so having these kind of shambling figures who are losing their identity is part of that central theme. And they're also useful to low-budget filmmakers in general, who tend to need smaller groups of extras and cheaper prosthetics that can't quite stand up to the motion of a speedy zombie. But in my mind, there's no doubt that fast zombies are more suited to a big-budget movie, and offer additional thrills due to their speed. Now, you might disagree and you're entitled to your opinion, and we can have that chat in the comments below, but this definitely works for filmmakers, and you only have to look at the numbers to see how. Roughly 182 zombie movies were made in the 36 years between 1968's Night of the Living Dead and 2004's Dawn, and nearly twice that, a whopping 350 zombie movies, were made in the 17 years since. And the fast zombie influence is plain to see in another massively popular franchise, the Call of Duty games, with their Nazi zombie modes that see players squaring off against wave after wave of speedy zombies. Now, in addition to its pop culture influence, Dawn also sees Snyder stretching his muscles as a filmmaker for the first time, and making steps towards establishing that signature style that he's so well known for. Slow motion, perhaps his most divisive visual technique, rears its head quite a few times here, particularly for these more sensory-focused moments of violence, to really make those hits hit harder. And of course, for a good old-fashioned bit of gun fetishism. Now, with Netflix's Army of the Dead fast approaching, it'll be interesting to see how Snyder switches up his approach to zombies after a few decades of working with superheroes. The action focus of Dawn is clearly here to stay, and a surprisingly commanding zombie apparently leading the hordes may even suggest a supernatural cause behind this particular outbreak. You'll have to watch it to find out. And maybe check out my review too. So if you don't want to miss that, then please click the subscribe button and the bell next to it to get notified when that review video comes out. That's it from me, but I'm really interested to hear your take on this apparently quite divisive horror topic in the comments below. What do you feel about Zack Snyder's original zombie movie? Are you looking forward to Army of the Dead? And of course, the perennial question, should zombies run or should they walk? Looking forward to chatting it through with you in the comments below. Have a good one, and bye for now.